Home Depot coming in right next to HEB, grumblings of getting close to lease execution with Dick's Sporting Goods and Lowe's, and you got Marshall, Old Navy, all coming to our submarket, right? I remember joining McCord 4 years ago and coming up here, and we were always waving our hands and saying, hey, you know, we need to get our fair shake. People need to pay attention to Northeast Houston. And we all had this grand vision of what life could be like out here. And it was just a vision. There had been nothing really built. But through everyone's hard work on branding the area and helping grow this area, also with Judge Emmett and the support of our county commissioners on building out infrastructure to support this area, this is becoming a reality. We are the shining star right now in a really difficult market. And when we go through this list of successes outside of what's happened at Generation Park, every day it gets us more and more excited about where we are today in the landscape of the city of Houston. Or sorry, not the city of Houston, of Harris County. But let me go ahead and so, hey, congratulations to everybody. We're on the map. It's taken some time, but we're here, and we're here to stay. We've had a really wonderful relationship with Judge Emmett, and he has always gone the extra mile to support this area and also Generation Park. We will miss him upon his departure. And I'm sure he's going to share some knowledge with you on the Astrodome, which is a topic of conversation that's on the front of everybody's mind right now. I know that he has worked tirelessly many, many hours on coming up with creative solutions that are best for the taxpayers and for our city. And I'm excited about what he's going to tell us, how that all panned out, if he's going to speak to that. I'm guessing you are, Judge Emmett. But Edward M. Emmett became Houston's county judge on March 6, 2007. A member of the House of Representatives from 1979 to 1987, Judge Emmett was chairman of the Committee on Energy, a member of the Transportation Committee, and represented the state on numerous national committees relating to energy and transportation policy. In 1989, President George H.W. Bush nominated Emmett as a commissioner at the Interstate Commerce Commission. After being confirmed unanimously by the United States Senate, Judge Emmett served on the commission for 3 years. Prior to becoming county judge, he received international recognition for his work in transportation and logistics policy. Among his many other activities, Judge Emmett is director of Harris County's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, chairman of the HGAC Transportation Policy Council, and chairman of the Harris County Juvenile Board. Judge Emmett attended Bel Air High School. He graduated from Rice University in 1971 with a BA degree in economics, and from the University of Texas at Austin in 1974 with a Master's of Public Affairs. Judge Emmett and his wife Gwen have been married for 40 plus years, and they have 4 children and 12 grandchildren. So let's all give Judge Emmett a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And just for those of you who like to keep count of these things, grandchild number 13 is due any moment. So before Monday, it'll be 13. So such is my life. Why am I here? Well, I've always had a warm spot in my heart for some of you in this room aren't old enough to remember probably. But from 1979 to 1987, I was the state representative for this area. Originally, it was just north of the river and everything east of Lake Houston down to Baytown. But then in redistricting, I also picked up Atascocita and some of these areas. So I just have a great affinity for this area. The other thing I have to say before I start is county government has really worked pretty well up here. And it's an odd situation because over the years, you've had 3 different county commissioners that have all had to step up and do what was right, and they've done that very well. I mean, you know, Commissioner Cagle, Commissioner Lee, now Commissioner Locke, and I guess it's 4 if you counting Commissioner Locke and Commissioner Mormon, because this is the pivot area. Whenever it gets redistricted, it swings a little bit, and it'll probably swing again in the next redistricting. So I have to express gratitude to all the county commissioners who have worked so hard up here. And number 3, I really want to thank the chamber, not just for inviting me out, but the way you set up the room. Because if you had put the podium over there, nobody would watch me. They would all be looking out the window at the great day that we're having. And some of them might anyway. So you folks along the back wall, be careful. I'm watching you. Little known fact, by the way, this has nothing to do with anything, but my staff knows it. And whenever I'm attending a meeting that I think may get tedious, I always sit where I can look out the window, just in case. You may tuck that into your memory bank as an idea for the future. That way you can act like you're paying attention, but maybe you're not. You know, whenever you talk about Harris County, it is unique, not only in the state of Texas, but really in the entire country. And I can't say it often enough. This is not criticism of the city of Houston, but it's just a fact that back in 1963, when the city of Houston did the strip annexations out all the highways, put all of the county plus a little bit of surrounding counties into the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Houston, then that created a situation where most people thought that eventually the city would go annex areas as they were built out, as the municipal utility districts were, the bonded indebtedness was paid off, and the city would just continue to grow. But that didn't happen for several reasons, 2 main ones being financial. The city didn't want to come out and take on more debt. And then the second one was, frankly, pure politics. Because if you come out and start taking in all new groups, then you get into the Voting Rights Act and everything else, and it just hasn't happened. And I'm not saying that's good, bad, or indifferent. We do have over 1,000 municipal utility districts in Harris County, which makes it very interesting as to the way we develop. But more importantly, what has happened, we take this county, which has almost 4.5 million people. That's more people than reside in 25 states. And you look at it and you compare it to other urban counties. Dallas County, according to Clay Jenkins, their county judge, so if the number's not exactly right, blame him. Unincorporated Dallas County, he says, has about 10,000 people. Everything else is in an incorporated city, so a lot of those services and projects get done by the cities. But in Harris County, we currently have 1.7 million people living in unincorporated Harris County, and we don't have ordinance making power, for example. So when the city of Houston decides to crack down on strip clubs, where do they go? Unincorporated Harris County. I can name one thing after another. Every year around holidays, I start getting a lot of phone calls and emails saying, why haven't you banned fireworks yet? If you don't ban fireworks, we're going to vote you out of office. That seems to be the latest line, by the way, for people who who can send relatively anonymous emails and say, if you don't do this one thing, never mind everything else you've done, we're going to throw you out. So such is life. But of course, the truth is we can't ban fireworks. The legislature won't let us. The county government is an arm of the state. We can only do what the state constitution and the Texas legislature allows us to do. And as frustrating as that is for the residents, it's even more frustrating for people like me. Now, the fireworks, we do get around that, and many of you have heard me tell this, so I probably shouldn't, but I keep saying it, so it works. I can declare an emergency, a drought emergency, and ban fireworks for a certain period of time, up to 7 days. And then the commissioners could overrule me, but they're the ones who get a lot of the the heat from no fireworks too. So typically what happens is before a holiday period, I go out and I look up, and if it hadn't rained in the last hour, it is declared a drought and an emergency, and we ban the bottle rockets and the aerial fireworks. And the fireworks industry is okay with that, because frankly, they don't want a conflagration. But it just shows you the hoops we have to go through to try and manage an urban population. Whether we like it or not, we are an urban county, and 1.7 million. By the year 2020, if population continues to grow the way it is, more people will live in unincorporated Harris County than live inside the city of Houston. So, just to give you an idea. Now, you throw on top of that, how are we financed? Well, county government, with a very, very few exceptions of some fees and hotel occupancy tax, we only get property tax. And I think the property tax is probably the most reviled tax in the world, and rightfully so. I mean, because the mere fact is, if I pay a certain amount for my house and somebody comes in and pays twice that much down the street, it doesn't make me have any more money, so why do I have to pay that much more property tax just because somebody else decided that the property was worth a lot more to them? I don't need to walk you through that. And we have the appraisal district, and that has nothing to do with Harris County, even though it's called the Harris County Appraisal District. That leads to the confusion, but that's what the legislature named it, so I have to deal with that. So when people start talking about taxes, all we get is the property tax. The most telling example I can give you right now, everybody knows the Super Bowl's coming next February. Where's it being played? In NRG Stadium, which is a county facility. How much revenue, you've read all about the hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to be spent in our community generating all that sales tax for local government. How much of that does the county get? Zero. So I've kind of taken a hard line. I was too late to do anything this time, but I've basically said, you know what, if you want another Super Bowl, another Final Four, unless the county taxpayer gets some benefit out of this, then you can play it in the city stadium. Oh, that's right, the city doesn't have a stadium. So, you know, I'm not trying to be mean, but it's just a reality that if people keep talking about the county needs to cut back on the property taxes, I'd love to. But the problem is that's all we get. And I'm going to say a little bit more about that later on. Aside from all that, we now have a very solid budget in the county. For several years, and this is not being critical of people who came before me, we did something called tax anticipation notes, because the way the property taxes come in, we'd have to borrow money and then pay back the loan from the property taxes when they came in, and that's not a good way to do business. Well, we've now got it so stable that we don't have to do that anymore, that we can actually float, because we've built a reserve that allows us then to just not borrow that money. And because of that, we now have a AAA bond rating. Everything the county does, we get a much lower interest rate. I don't need to tell you in business, whatever your rating is important. And we have a AAA bond rating. So what do we do with all of this? What does the county really do? That's a fun thing to ask people, because they don't always know. We're not facing any major problems right now. Since Tuesday, we've got the Astrodome handled. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, because the reality is the Astrodome is a building. That's all. It's a building that taxpayers own. It's fully paid for, and we had to do something with it. We're not allowed to tear it down because it's protected by the Historical Commission. It would cost $35 million to tear it down, after which you don't have anything. And I guarantee you within 5 years, somebody would go, gee, I really wish we had the Astrodome so that we could do things undercover. Now, just last weekend, there was a festival that got canceled because of the weather. It would have been nice if it could have moved under, but again, I'll get to the Astrodome at the end. The main things we do, according to our orders from the state, Criminal justice, 40% of our budget, right off the top. Law enforcement. And by the way, this is an aside. Seeing all the police officers over there, did you make note of the drinking that goes on at Los Cucos? And I'm just saying. You may want to designate a driver for the next couple of weeks that you're over there. And in criminal justice, we don't get to pick our customers. You know, it's a system that the state passes the laws and they tell us what's illegal, and the prosecutors prosecute, and the judges judge, and the real judges, not the county judge, and then the sheriff runs the jail. And another aside, I'm going to have a lot of asides today. Poor Sheriff Hickman got sued by a group of people for the way the bonds are being handled. Well, he didn't have anything to do with that. His job is, if a judge says, incarcerate this person, he incarcerates the person. I will tell you, even though it's a pending lawsuit, I think there are a lot of people in jail shouldn't be in jail. I mean, it's costing us an inordinate amount of money. And my main complaint about it is mental health. We have got to separate mental health from criminal justice. We have, on any given night, of the 9,000 or 10,000 people who are in the Harris County Jail, it is the largest mental health facility in the state of Texas. And on any given night, 2,500 to 3,000 people are in there, and their real issue is mental health. And they're receiving psychotropic medication. That's just wrong. That's one where the state's going to have to step up and focus on mental health. About 25 years ago, the legislature made the right decision. They decided to quit warehousing people with mental health issues in various facilities around the state. That was right. But unfortunately, they didn't do anything to create facilities in the localities, and it comes back on the county. It's a classic unfunded mandate. We somehow have to take care of these people. And now that we've got a lot of vets coming back from the wars, and they've got various issues, we've got to separate mental health. And it's not just good public policy, it's good fiscal policy, because it costs a lot more to deal with somebody in a criminal justice setting than it does in a mental health setting. And so we've got to do that. So criminal justice, it's the main thing we do. The courts, the criminal justice piece I said was 40%. That's just the law enforcement. Another 28% of the county budget are the courts. And legislature creates courts, and we have to implement them. So that's the big thing. But then if you look at your property tax bill, you'll see there's another item on there called the Harris County Hospital District, which has now been branded as Harris Health. What's its job? To provide health care to poor people, indigent health care. And in a county our size, like I said, bigger than 25 states, we have a lot of them. And right now, it is funded by you, the property taxpayer of Harris County. So when the discussion comes up about Medicaid expansion, I took a different path, but so did every other urban county judge, Republican, Democrat alike. We said, well, wait a minute. If Medicaid will pay for a lot of these people's care, why would we not take those federal dollars? And of course, it's all wrapped up in what you think of the Affordable Care Act, but that is a false premise. And I know we've got people here from Memorial Hermann, and they'll go amen to all of this, I think, won't you? Well, yeah. Please say amen. You're good. Because it doesn't change the number of indigents who need care. There are folks in Austin who seem to think, well, it's going to create all these new people. Well, it's not. We got the same people. They still need care, and it's really a question of who pays for it. You, the property taxpayer, or do we use the Medicaid funds? It has nothing to do with the Affordable Care Act. And so hopefully after the election, and by the way, since you said, my view of the election is very simple. I said this a long time ago. I'm pulling the covers over my head, and I'm coming out after the election. That's it. I'm not going to engage really one way or the other, although it is important. I know this is so this won't be a partisan statement, but it is important that people go vote, and no matter what you think about going on at the top of the ticket, vote all the way down to the bottom of that ballot, because there are a lot of judges and local people that it would be a shame to see folks tossed out of office just because people say, well, we don't like what's going on at the top. That shouldn't have anything to do with it. So indigent health care is a major, major concern. But back to your property tax bill, total bill is about 64 cents. 17 cents of it goes to the hospital district. So anybody who tells you they really want to lower your property taxes, the best thing they can do is do Medicaid expansion. They can lower it by a huge amount compared to the 1/8 of a cent and the 1/4 of a cent that they all talk about in the legislature. It can be lowered a bunch, or some of that money can go to other things. What are the other things we do? Well, transportation. Since you are so proud of the way this area has grown, it's really grown largely for one reason: Beltway 8. And Beltway 8 East would never have been built had County Judge John Lindsay and earlier Commissioner's Court not created the Harris County Toll Road Authority. I still get once in a while, and this has come up recently because, people who want to criticize, they say, well, this is just like the toll roads. They told us they were going to be free, and they're not free. They were never going to be free, and they are never going to be free, because the money from one part of the toll road is what allows us to build and expand the other parts. Beltway 8 East would never have been able to go revenue bonds because the traffic wasn't there. But it's a classic: if you build it, they will come. You wouldn't have built Generation Park if that Beltway hadn't been there. I think that's a safe thing to say. A lot of what Harris County does is transportation related. But a lot of the things that we're, and the commissioners are faced with, we are rapidly growing. And as these subdivisions I talked about that have all the municipal utility districts in them, as those streets wear out, those are going onto the county road log. So how are the commissioners supposed to pay for that versus taking money and paying for major thoroughfares? So transportation. So criminal justice, indigent health care, transportation. Then we get to something that's on everybody's mind right now: flood control. We live on the Gulf Coast. We don't drain very well, and flooding is a problem. And unfortunately, it's a lot like the whack-a-mole game. It pops up one place, you solve it, pops up somewhere else. Developments come in, you put in detention ponds. They work. Do they work as well as designed? It depends on where they are. But that is going to be an ongoing issue. And we have the Harris County Flood Control District, which, by the way, is paid for by property taxes. Now, we do get Corps of Engineers projects, and we use matching funds in trying to do that. But that's not going to go away. That will be a major focus of ours going forward. We far removed from here, but the reservoirs on the west side of town are going to need attention, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So we're going to have to figure out where we do it. Now, not that there's much humorous about flooding, but I did get a call from the New York Times right after the floods, and the gentleman wanted to talk to me about the flooding in Cyprus. And he said, I'm told it's never been like that before. And I said, how do you know? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, when I was in the legislature back in the late 70s, I'd drive from Kingwood to Austin. I'd go 2920. I'd go by Cy-Fair High School. It was a 2A school at the time. It was the only high school in that district. Now it's a 6A school. They've got, 10 or 12 high schools. I said, nobody lived out there, so nobody knew whether it flooded or not. And he never wrote his story because he couldn't find anybody. Now, I'm not making light of the fact we do need to take care of the needs out there on Cypress Creek and the watershed, because that watershed spills over into others and it goes down into the reservoirs. But flood control is something we will continue to do. Then, beginning in 2001, probably 2002 or 3 actually, the legislature declared that the county judge in every county is the director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. That was following 9/11. If you're in Loving County that has 84 people, that's okay. You can handle that. In Harris County, if you have not been, this is a field trip for you. If you have not seen the Harris County Emergency Operations Center, it is the premier, I mean this seriously, this is not just braggadocio, it is the best EOC in the entire country, bar none. It's got 98 workstations. We have an emergency, we've got everybody in there. We've got all of our partners, both public sector, private sector. Everybody's got a desk. We lock in and we can handle it. The sheriff's office now has a real-time center in there where they deal with incidents as they're going on. But what makes the whole building work, the TranStar building, that makes it fascinating, it's a joint operation of the state of Texas, City of Houston, Harris County, and Metro. Imagine that. 4 different government entities actually cooperating and working together to deal with emergencies. And it really, really works well. But it costs money. And it comes out of a budget that is paid for by property tax. That's what we do. So emergency management. Now I do have to add one thing about that. A little bit self-deprecating. When they told me that I am now the director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, I said, emergency management, that's fine. But Homeland Security, really? Do I think that FBI or NSA or any of those agencies in Washington, if there's a terrorist threat, are they going to pick up the phone and call County Judge Ed Emmett? No, they're not. They're going to call law enforcement, which is what they should do. And so no matter who the sheriff is, I've said, look, you're in charge. I'm not outing him. People know this. I've hired a man who's former CIA. He's got all the clearances in the world that I could probably never achieve. So he gets information, the sheriff gets the information. They tell me what I need to know to come tell people like you. But so I don't kid myself that I'm in any way in charge of Homeland Security. And then finally, the other thing that the county does after all those others, criminal justice, health care, transportation, flood control, emergency management, is quality of life. And that's everything else. It's parks. It's, by the way, public health also includes an animal shelter and those kinds of things. But it's parks, and it's the NRG complex, which includes this round building called the Astrodome. In terms of the overall budget, what goes into quality of life issues is really quite small. But it's the piece that tends to get the most attention. So when I have somebody, really complaining about what goes on with the Astrodome, you kind of go, well, why don't you care about healthcare? Why don't you care about transportation? Why don't you care about flooding? Those are the big issues. But I've put it off as long as I can, so here's what we're doing with the dome. I have to give a little history, because radio talk show hosts notwithstanding, they really don't know what they're talking about. When I came in as county judge in March of 2007, there was an exclusive agreement with a company, but basically 2 guys, to develop the Astrodome into a hotel. Fine with me. I mean, it was a decision I didn't have to make. They'd made it before I got there, so why should I interfere? Problem is, once I started meeting with those people, two facts came out. Number one, they had never built a hotel. And number 2, they had no money. Other than that, it was a splendid idea. So because of previous business ventures, I called some people up at the Marriott Corporation, said, does this make any sense? And they said, absolutely not. And so we pulled the plug on the hotel, went back out to the public and said, okay, we've got this building here. Anybody want it? It's yours. Come to us. And we had all the suggestions in the world. The movie studio, they came once, never heard from them again. The indoor ski area, the theme park, my favorite, I'm sure if you've heard me talk, I've said this before, but it really was fun. You know, the dome floor sits 30 feet below ground level. And one guy wanted to come in and flood it and reenact naval battle scenes. And I think that's kind of cool. And if you think about it, now that we have drones and things, you could do the Battle of Midway. I mean, you could have all kinds of stuff. But he didn't have any money either. So all these people had ideas, more than 100 ideas, but no money. So it came back to the public. So then we tried to float a bond issue for $217 million back in 2013. With probably less than 10% of the voters voting countywide, it lost by a 53-47 vote. That's why I get a little irritated when I hear people say the voters have overwhelmingly rejected. No, they didn't. I mean, and then other people say we voted to tear it down. No, you didn't do that either, because that wasn't on the ballot, because we're not allowed to do that. We can only put a bond issue on the ballot. We can't put on either or type things. So that failed. So then we're back to the drawing board, and we've gone back and forth. Make a long story short, after meeting with all kinds of groups, it became apparent that in order for the floor of the dome to be useful, it needed to be at ground level. Other people had said, tear down the dome, we need more parking. So we're doing both. We're raising the floor to ground level. That gives us 2 levels underneath that we're going to convert to 1,400 parking spaces. That's been a little hard for the critics to get their hands around, because they said they wanted more parking, and now we're giving them more parking without even tearing down the dome, so I don't know what to do with that. But what it creates is 7.5 acres under cover and another 1.5 acres or so around the edge of premium space that can be used for almost anything. And for example, the rodeo could easily move their kiddie rides and their food court in there. The festival that was canceled last weekend could have been in there. Offshore Technology Conference has already written a letter, said, yes, we want to do this. The auto show wants to expand and become one of the 2 or 3 largest auto shows in the world. The boat show, all those things, because now you're going to have covered space, protected from the weather. But more importantly, it gets it off the taxpayer dime, because yes, it costs some money to do this, $105 million. $35 million will come from general revenue, which is the cost that it would have been to tear it down. $35 from the hotel occupancy tax, and $35 from a parking enterprise fund that we have downtown around those buildings. But it also, that doesn't even take into consideration any rental fees or any money that we get from the tax increment reinvestment zone that's down in that area. So it's a very conservative approach. But more importantly, the upper reaches of the dome, now once you put in an open space like Discovery Green on steroids, you can have that and the parking. It's much more attractive to private interest to use the above part. So my plan is, and this is not something the commissioners have signed off on, so that's why I say it's my plan, is once we do our work to turn the upper reaches over to a private conservancy, and like the zoo's now a conservancy, a lot of things like that, and let them deal with it. And I think the rodeo ought to be part of that conservancy moving forward, and I think it's a good idea. Not everybody does. I shared the email I got this morning. How does it feel to look in a mirror and see a corrupt coward looking back at you? I did call that fellow, by the way. We had a fairly kind chat, but it's going to have its critics. But my bottom line, and then I'll stop and take questions. Of all the things we do, it still comes back to the question of money. And the only real revenue source we have is that property tax. So when folks in Austin start saying, we're going to cut your property taxes, but the state doesn't even have a property tax, it causes me to pause, because if they do that, and if they put some mandate on that the county can't grow above a certain amount, then we're going to have to come to you and say, okay, what do you want us not to do? Criminal justice? Can't. Healthcare? We can't. There are laws. Anybody shows up, we've got to take care of them. We're trying to be more efficient with it. Transportation, I guess we could quit building roads. Flood control, now would not be a good time for us to announce, by the way, we're stopping all our flood control projects. That wouldn't go over well. So I try to get people to understand what is the county government. We're really not a philosophical realm. We are a job. We have certain things that we have been told to do, and we have to do them. And that's why I kind of enjoy it, frankly, because the politics can get to be very irritating at times. But it's an enjoyable job, and I think the county's done pretty well. So with that, let me stop and take any questions you might have. We're in solid shape. Yes, sir?
This may or may not apply to you, but I know that the lake out here is owned by the city.
Correct. Correct.
And I know that the state legislature is looking at or in the last session, they passed the water conservation, or water bill, whatever it's called. They're kind of, with West Texas and the drought and then flooding here, and they stopped some of the illegal dredging or illegal sand operation upriver. But with everything that's happened over the years, the river out here has gotten very shallow, and so is this lake. And so our area is more prone to some catastrophic flooding in the future than what we've seen in the past. And what part does the county, or can the county play in that?
We don't play a big part in it. The Corps does. And so, but it is something that obviously we care about, the commissioners care about. Of course, those of us who have lived in Kingwood, I mean, I haven't lived there in quite a while, but whenever we see the flooding in Forest Cove and they say it's Kingwood, and I'm going, well, no, it's really Forest Cove, but it doesn't make it any less bad. But you've got the San Jacinto River Authority in there, and so, yeah, somebody's going to have to come together and coordinate all that somehow, because I'm sure it's grown up. Same things happen on the reservoirs on the west. If you go out there, there's forest in them, and well, that doesn't make any sense. Nothing else? You can't go to one. You may as well. Yes, sir.
Any comments on high-speed rail?
One of the most, it's not our issue. Let me hasten to say that. One of the most misunderstood things in the state of Texas right now, it's supposed to be privately built and privately funded. And I've had a state senator say, yeah, but if it goes under, we'll have to take it over. And I go, no, you don't. I can show you abandoned rail lines all over the country where private freight railroads have abandoned them. I understand the property owners who don't want high-speed rail coming through their family farm. I agree. If I owned a farm and it was coming through, I wouldn't want it there either, but it wouldn't make me right. And I point out all the time, Loop 610, I went to Bel Air High School, and Loop 610 was not there. The people in Bel Air really didn't want Loop 610 coming right through the middle of Bel Air, but where would we be without Loop 610? Or Beltway 8 or any other major transportation project. I'm just glad it's not. I mean, the dome's been enough of a bane of my existence. I'm glad I don't have to deal with that one. But in general, I support high-speed rail. I think it's something that would be very useful. Okay. Nothing else, huh? Answered all your questions about the dome, about your property taxes. No, I wouldn't say that. Although Senator Betancourt is having a hearing at this very moment about appraisals and how awful they are, and I didn't get invited. Imagine that. Because I probably would have pointed out that, well, the Harris County Appraisal District, you sat on their board for years, and I don't remember you ever proposing any changes. That's kind of an ouch moment, though, and they don't want to hear that. And, personally, let me ask this, because I'm not in a position to make this decision. But would you trade for an extra 1.6 cents sales tax in Harris County? We could eliminate all residential property tax from the county point of view. How many of you would rather do that? Okay. Because, the legislature is not looking at a real reform. They're looking at, niggling around the edges. And so I think they ought to be looking at a fundamental change in the way the property tax is administered. Yes, sir.
Talk briefly about how you coordinate with the city of Houston.
How do I coordinate with the city of Houston? We try. No, and it really does, and I've been fortunate. It comes down more to personal relationships. For example, I say it's a minor issue, but the people who care about it, it's a big issue. The city has an animal shelter. We have animal shelters. SPCA, Humane Society, and none of it's coordinated. So I said, why don't Mayor Turner, you and I have an animal summit, and we pull everybody together in one room and figure out how we can do this better. So those kind of things we work on pretty well. There's always the problem I have, and this is personal, and then I want to address something you intimated. The problem I have that does drive me up the wall sometimes, people know what a mayor is, they don't know what a county judge is. Even though I've got 4.5 million constituents and he's got 2.2 million constituents, people, they fundamentally look to the mayor. And I understand that. I'm not bitter, it's just, but there are some things that really aren't the city realm. I did enjoy it for a long time. He got all these nasty letters and emails about the Astrodome. Go get them. But like I mentioned the Super Bowl early on, he gets all this attention. It's played in a county facility, and I'm going, I don't need the attention, but can you give us some of the money so that the taxpayer can be paid back? I will decide by the end of November whether or not I'm going to run again. And the reason is, I'll tell you the politics. This is not a political statement, so everybody can relax. Filing for the 2018 election starts around the 1st of November of 2017. That means if you're going to raise any money, and I haven't had a fundraiser in 3 years because I don't like raising money, but you have to have one in the spring to sort of scare off opponents, be real blunt. And in order to do that, you have to plan it in the fall. So that backs you all the way back to the fall of 2016. You have to make a decision for what you're going to do in 2018, which is, I think, one of the reasons a lot of good people don't get into politics, because it's such an odd thing. And in my case, I'm going to be very, very candid. At the end of this term in January 2019, that same year I turned 70. And I don't know that I want to be doing this in my 70s. It's just, and so Gwen and I and our host of thousands of kids and grandchildren, we'll sit down and we'll talk about it. But it's a great job, and I enjoy doing it, and I enjoy coming out and talking to people like you. So thank you very much.